If you happen to be sunk into something comfortable right now, a sofa, an old armchair, a swivel chair that's seen better days, do me a small favor. Tip your head down and look into the crack where the cushion meets the frame. You'll find a thin gray film down there, and if you're not too squeamish about it, drag a fingertip through it. We like to tell ourselves a comforting little story about what that gray stuff is. Sand, maybe, blown in all the way from the Sahara. Soot coughed out by some factory across town. Or, if we're feeling poetic, the romantic leftovers of cosmic dust, actual stardust settling onto the furniture. And that story is sweet. It's also, to be honest, a kind of well-meaning self-deception. Because if you owned a microscope powerful enough, you discover that the thing clinging to your finger isn't the outside world at all. It's the past you. To put it more bluntly, it's little fragments of the corpse you've just finished shedding. I know that sounds slightly nauseating, but it's the plain truth. Your body is a building in a permanent state of collapse. Every hour that goes by, something like 600,000 flecks of skin quietly abandon you. Lock yourself in a sealed room for a year, and when you finally walked out, you'd leave roughly half a kilogram of yourself behind, already crumbled into dust. We are, in the most literal sense the word allows, falling apart. And here's the part that should make the hair stand up on your arm. In the 3 seconds or so it took you to read that last sentence, about 10 million cells inside you went quietly dark and died. 10 million. To feel that number instead of just hearing it, picture an entire city, say, the whole population of a place the size of Los Angeles, several million people, winking out of existence in a single blink. And then, this is the genuinely miraculous bit, being completely rebuilt in the very next blink. Right now, deep in your bone marrow and in the stem cells under your skin, a frantic night shift is stamping out fresh recruits to fill every vacancy the dead just left. You are a river. The old Greek Heraclitus said you can't step in the same river twice, because the water's always moving on. You're that river. On the outside, you still look like the same person, same face in the mirror, same name on the mail, let's call him Jack. But the parts inside have already been swapped out, top to bottom, several times over. Which lands us, almost immediately, in the single most maddening little logic trap in all of biology. Let's put your body up against the family car parked downstairs. If you back that car into a post and scrape a long curl of paint off the bumper, that paint is gone. For good. Unless you hand money to a body shop, that scratch will loyally keep the car company every single day until the thing finally gets hauled to the scrapyard. We have a grand name for this. We call it the second law of thermodynamics. We also call it things break. But your body, it turns out, flatly refuses to play by those rules. Slice your finger open chopping an onion, and you don't have to ship yourself off to a dealership for a replacement part. Within seconds, an entire army, tiny machines built out of protein and living cells, come sprinting to the scene. They plug the leak, throw up a scab, start weaving fresh collagen underneath, and very often they finish the whole repair without leaving so much as a scar. And that, right there, is the crux of everything we're about to talk about. We are not simply a machine. We are a machine that fixes itself. So here's the thing that ought to keep you up at night. If we're walking around with a blueprint that exquisite, if nature has already cracked every hard engineering problem, solved it so completely that it can grow a single fertilized egg into a fully assembled adult of 30 trillion cells, then why does this glorious machine, after a mere 70 or 80 years of running, suddenly throw down its tools and announce, I quit? Why can the same master engineer who can grow you a whole new lobe of liver not manage to smooth out a few wrinkles on your face? Why does the defense system that can scramble an immune army and hunt down a virus with sniper precision suddenly, in old age, gaze right past the cancer cells throwing a riot in the next room? Go and ask the old fellow in the corner and he'll blow a slow smoke ring and tell you, well, that's just getting old, isn't it? Run any machine long enough and it wears out. And honestly, that wear and tear theory feels so right. It's the most intuitive idea in the world. The trouble is, it's not just a little bit wrong, it's a complete misreading of how evolution actually works. Because if aging were really just wear and tear, then explain this. Why is it that once your teeth fall out they're gone forever, while a shark cheerfully grows and discards thousands of teeth across its life? Why does an ordinary mouse die of old age at 2, while a naked mole rat, using essentially the same parts list, can keep going for 30? The real answer is that natural selection is an extraordinarily greedy, extraordinarily shrewd accountant. And on its spreadsheet, there's exactly one number that matters. How many copies of you get made? Reproduction. That's the whole KPI. Think of it like walking into a car rental office. The rental company could not care less whether that car is still running a century from now. It cares about one thing only. Does the car run fast and refuse to break down during the rental period? And your rental period is your reproductive years. If somebody could live to 500 but burned every scrap of their energy on maintaining their own body, with nothing left over to actually have children, then in the great game of evolution, that person is a flat, total loser. Their genes get quietly wiped from the board by competitors who live short and breed like there's no tomorrow. So nature struck a cold-blooded little bargain. It buried a countdown clock down in your genes. And it doesn't matter how many blueberries you eat, how many marathons you grind out, or how regularly you pay to have the blood plasma of teenagers pumped into your veins the way certain tech billionaires now do. None of it seems able to stop the alarm on that clock from eventually going off. At some appointed moment, your body behaves exactly as if it's received a mysterious order from headquarters. Pull back. Retreat. The repair work starts getting done sloppily. Trash begins to pile up in the corners of your cells. Picture hiring a world-class renovation crew to look after your house. They labor beautifully for 40 years. Immaculate work, never a complaint. And then one morning the foreman glances at the calendar, gives a sharp little whistle, and calls out, "Right lads, the budget's run dry, down tools, pull out." From that day on, the paint starts peeling, the pipes start stripping, the rot creeps in. But, and this is everything, that decay is no longer an accident. It's a long premeditated withdrawal of funding. We don't grow old because we can't fix ourselves. We grow old because, at a certain point, nature does the sums and decides that continuing to repair you simply isn't worth what it costs. To see exactly how that grim little accounting gets done, we're going to have to shrink ourselves down and slip inside the microscopic universe under your skin. We'll go and visit the ends of your DNA, deep in the nucleus, frayed and splitting like the tips of old shoelaces. We'll tour the mitochondria, the cell's power plants, coughing and throwing sparks like clapped-out boilers. And we'll watch how certain worn-out cells, the ones that were supposed to nobly take their own lives and instead turned into shambling zombies, mount their quiet little rebellion inside you. This is at heart a detective story. The crime is time itself. The suspect list runs long. There's oxygen on it, there's sugar, there's even the iron laws of physics. But before we yank the mask off the true culprit hiding at the bottom of the cell, hold on to one strange idea. The killer who decided you'd grow old may be the very same loan shark whose contract you happily signed in your youth, in exchange for the small matter of surviving long enough to reproduce. If evolution kept a finance department, I'd put money on the manager being exactly the kind of accountant I just described, cold-blooded, ruthless, squinting at a spreadsheet and chasing every last cent, and, above all, a chronic short-termist. We prefer to imagine natural selection the other way, of course. We like to picture it as a kindly, faintly obsessive craftsman, quietly hammering away in the workshop of this planet for billions of years, lovingly polishing every species toward flawless perfection. And following that logic, we naturally assume that we, surely nature's proudest piece of work, must have earned ourselves a nice long warranty. A decent pension plan, at the very least. We've clawed our way to the top of the food chain, after all. We learned to wear trousers. We invented antibiotics. Doesn't nature owe us an eternal body in return, or at least a sturdy, reliable one, so that after retirement we can potter peacefully in the garden, or finally take that cruise around the world? Regrettably, the answer is a flat, ringing no. In the eyes of evolution, your retirement isn't just meaningless, it's an outright squandering of precious resources. And to really feel that chilling indifference, we need to run a little thought experiment. Suppose nature genuinely took pity on us and built one person who simply never ages. We'll call him Forever Jack. Forever Jack's cells repair every injury perfectly. His DNA never makes a typo. His heart stays exactly as strong as it was at 18, forever and ever. In principle, barring some accident, this man could keep on living right up until the heat death of the universe. But the trouble is precisely those accidents. Even with godlike powers of self-repair, Forever Jack can still step outside and get flattened by a car that's lost its brakes. He can still be struck by lightning, still get crushed by a piano falling out of a third-floor window, still slip in the shower and snap his neck on the tile. Statistics are merciless about this. Say Forever Jack's odds of dying in some random accident are just 1 in 1,000 in any given year. Run that out, and within a few thousand years he is, to a near certainty, thoroughly and permanently dead anyway. And that hands evolution a deeply awkward accounting problem. Since Forever Jack is going to die in some stupid mishap sooner or later no matter what, why on earth would nature pour vast quantities of energy into building his body to last 100 million years? It would be like bolting a jet engine, one rated to fly 100,000 kilometers, onto a bumper car that's statistically guaranteed to crash about 5 minutes after it leaves the gate. That's not engineering, that's waste. And our shrewd accountant, the moment it spots that line item, reaches for the red pen, strikes it clean off the budget, and redirects every one of those calories somewhere it'll actually pay off. Sharper teeth, say, or a stronger drive to reproduce. This is exactly the conclusion Peter Medawar reached in his London laboratory back in 1952. He gave it a wonderful name, the shadow of natural selection. And Medawar's logic is infuriatingly, almost insultingly simple. Natural selection is blind. It quite literally cannot see old people. Imagine a horrible mutation, a gene that makes its carrier's heart explode on their 10th birthday. That gene gets eliminated instantly, ruthlessly, because the poor child dies before ever having children of their own. The gene never gets passed down. The scissors of natural selection snip it out, clean and efficient, exactly as designed. But now imagine a different mutation, one that gives you a fatal heart attack at 80. By the time you're 80, you've already had 3 kids, and those kids may well have had kids of their own. That heart attack at 80 gene has long since hitched a comfortable ride aboard a sperm or an egg and slipped into the next generation. And at that point, no matter what horror that gene unleashes on the 80-year-old, even if it sets the man's whole body alight, natural selection is utterly powerless to do anything about it. It can't arrest the culprit. The culprit has already escaped, alive and well, into the body of the next generation. Which means that as your age climbs, the power of natural selection to protect you falls off a cliff. Our bodies are stuffed to bursting with these late-acting junk genes, for the simple reason that nature can't be bothered to come back and clean them out. But laziness isn't even the worst of it. If Medawar exposed nature's sloth, then George Williams 5 years later in 1957 exposed its greed. Williams put forward an idea with a gloriously clunky name, antagonistic pleiotropy. Awful to say out loud, I know. But what it actually means is the devil's bargain. Some genes aren't simply good or simply bad, they're double agents. They do you a tremendous favor in youth, and then they turn around and kill you in old age. And faced with a deal like that, natural selection will, without a flicker of hesitation, grab the benefit in youth, even when the price tag reads, an agonizing death decades later. The textbook example is testosterone. For a 20-year-old man in the Stone Age, a flood of testosterone is practically a gift dropped straight from heaven. It packs muscle onto his frame, makes him fiercer in the hunt, more savage when he's brawling with a rival for a mate. And crucially, it fills him with a roaring desire for the opposite sex. It's a VIP ticket to a house full of children. But that very same hormone, by the time the man hits 60, has quietly switched sides. Now it's pouring fuel on prostate cancer, dampening his immune system, and nudging his heart toward disease. So picture the package on the table. Be a magnificent stud at 20, in exchange for being wired up to hospital tubes at 70. What does natural selection pick? It slaps the buy now button without a second's thought. Because over the long, brutal run of our evolutionary history, the overwhelming majority of people simply never lived to 70 to feel the agony of prostate cancer in the first place. That side effect, waiting patiently at age 70, was a check written against an account that back then would essentially never be cashed. And so we became the victims of that short-term trade. To let you win the one brawl at 20 that won you a mate, nature cheerfully overdrew the health you were going to need at 70. Which brings us right back to the metaphor sitting at the center of all of this, the rental car theory. Think of nature as an exceptionally stingy car rental company, and your body as the economy sedan that's just rolled off the lot. In this whole transaction, nature, the rental company, cares about precisely one thing. Can that car, your body, safely carry its passenger, your genes, from the place of birth all the way to the destination mark, producing offspring? As long as the car runs fast, the air conditioning blows cold, and the brakes still grip over that roughly 40-year journey, it's a good car. A great car, even. But as for what becomes of that car once you've had your children and raised them to the point where they can fend for themselves, well, who cares? By then, the odometer has rolled well past 100,000 miles. The transmission started slipping. There's rust blooming along the chassis. If this were a car you actually owned, you might sink a small fortune into servicing it, hunting down replacement parts, keeping it alive out of love. But to nature, the rental company, this car has already done the one job it was rented to do. Tom Kirkwood gave this idea its proper name, the disposable soma. Soma just means the body, the perishable part of you, as opposed to the genes you pass on. And his point is brutally simple. Energy is finite. The calories you take in each day only stretch so far. And nature is forced to make a choice with them. Pour that energy into wildly expensive, never-ending repair of the body, or spend it producing the next generation. And for any species you care to name, betting on the future beats clinging to the present every single time. So we, exactly like that rental car, were stamped with a scrap-by date the very moment we rolled off the line. It really is a bleak way to look at things. We don't grow old because biology is somehow incapable of immortality. That's the cruel part. Out in nature, there are bacteria that have been dividing, unbroken, for billions of years. There are Greenland sharks swimming around right now that have been alive for 5 centuries. The actual reason we age is that nature ran the cost-benefit analysis on us, coolly, line by line, and arrived at a single cold-blooded verdict: you're not worth it. Spending precious energy to keep your body soaring at 90 would be about as sensible as coating a disposable paper cup in gold leaf. But all of that is still only the macroscopic fine print, the headline terms of the contract. Nature has now signed, deep into your genes, this loan shark deal that trades away your old age to bankroll the glory of your youth. The question is, down at the microscopic level, how exactly does it collect on that debt? When the cold-blooded foreman blows his whistle and calls the retreat, what actually happens out on the construction site inside your body? To find out, we have to lift our eyes off the abacus of evolution and climb down into a dim, frantically busy archive room deep in the nucleus of a single cell. And in there, hunched over a desk, is a tireless typist, copying out the entire book of life at a frankly unbelievable speed, who has just started making some genuinely unforgivable mistakes. Before we walk into this trial down in the microscopic world, we owe scientists a small word of thanks, specifically for their fanatical, almost touching love of making lists. Back in 2013, a group of biologists from some of the best institutions on Earth sat down together to thrash out, once and for all, why re-age. And after a great deal of fierce arguing, they reached a kind of consensus and published a landmark paper laying out what are now famous as the 9 hallmarks of aging. Very grand, very high-minded, doesn't it sound? Genomic instability, telomere attrition. Every one of those phrases is engineered, it seems, to glaze over a normal person's eyes within about 4 seconds. But strip away the headache-inducing jargon, and what you're actually left with is a thoroughly gripping crime film. Because these 9 suspects don't work alone, and they don't work at random. They've got a clear division of labor, and we can round them up into 3 distinct gangs of robbers, all currently operating inside you. So let's swing the spotlight onto the first gang. These are the destroyers of information, the vandal librarians. Under their meddling, your body slowly, steadily forgets how to do its own job. And every bit of that chaos begins in one hopelessly overcrowded room, the archive deep in the cell's nucleus. If anyone's ever told you your body is a spacious, tidy, well-run factory, I'm sorry, but they were lying to you. The truth about the microscopic level is that it is crowded to a frankly absurd degree. Here's a fact that even physicists find a little hard to believe. If you took the DNA coiled up inside a single one of your cell nuclei and pulled it perfectly straight, it would stretch out to roughly 2 meters. 2 meters. Taller than the tallest person you know, crammed into one microscopic dot. And remember, that's just one cell. You've got something like 30 trillion of them. If you had the patience to splice all the DNA in your entire body end to end into a single thread, that thread would be long enough to run from here to Pluto and back, and not just once, but several times over. It genuinely scrambles the mind to think about. So what does it actually mean, physically, to stuff a 2-meter thread into a container whose diameter is about 1/15 the width of a single human hair? It's a bit like trying to cram a 40-kilometer fishing line into a tennis ball. And that thread can't be allowed to tangle, not ever, because it has to lie ready at every instant to be read and copied. This isn't merely a nightmare of storage, it's a never-ending logistical catastrophe. Your DNA holds something like 3 billion base pairs, 3 billion letters, a vast, sprawling encyclopedia of life. And just to keep your body ticking over, you have to manufacture hundreds of millions of brand new cells every single day. Which means the typist down in that archive room, a molecule called DNA polymerase, has to copy out this enormous tome, cover to cover, countless times a day. And to be perfectly fair to him, the typist is an extraordinarily conscientious worker with a stunningly low error rate. The problem is his working conditions, which are simply appalling. It's like forcing a man to type in the middle of a battlefield. Ultraviolet light comes slicing through the pages like flying shrapnel. The exhaust fumes of your own breathing, those notorious free radicals, drift over the mani by the time you live in compassion or inspiring concern, which you feel believed. And every kind of chemical toxin goes darting and whining past his head. In conditions like that, under a hail of fire like that, the pages are going to take damage. There's no way around it. Now, your body does come equipped with a proofreading team, a squad of DNA repair enzymes, diligent little editors patrolling the manuscript with red pens, fixing errors wherever they find them. But as the mistakes pile up faster and faster, the editors start to fall behind. And eventually this encyclopedia of life becomes a tattered, gutted wreck. Pages missing, words missing, whole passages illegible. The cell can no longer read its own instructions. So it does the only thing it can. It throws up its hands, stops working, or quietly destroys itself. And yet, even that isn't the most lethal thing in the room. Because tucked away at the very outer edge of every page in that encyclopedia, there's an even deadlier device. A countdown timer. To understand that timer, we have to wind the clock back to the early 20th century and pay a visit to a Nobel laureate. A man in a long black robe with a definite streak of the mystic about him, Alexis Carrel. In his day, Carrel was a genuine superstar. He invented the technique of stitching blood vessels back together, and in doing so he saved an enormous number of lives. But he was also a touch, how shall I put this, eccentric. He believed in mediums and seances. He was an enthusiast for eugenics. And he was utterly, unshakably convinced that the living cell is, by its nature, immortal. In 1912, at the Rockefeller Institute, Carrel kicked off an experiment destined for the history books, though, as it turned out, in a slightly mortifying way. He snipped a small piece of heart muscle tissue out of a chick embryo, dropped it into a dish of nutrient broth, and announced that as long as you faithfully changed the broth, this little scrap of chicken heart could beat away, alive, forever. The world was floored. This immortal chicken heart became something of a genuine celebrity. Every year, on the 17th of January, the New York newspapers would solemnly print the chicken heart's latest birthday, the way you'd announce the age of a beloved monarch. It beat its way through the First World War. It beat its way through the Great Depression. It even outlived Carrel himself. It wasn't until 1946, the 34th year of the experiment, that the famous chicken heart was finally lifted out of its dish for good. Carrel's theory seemed absolutely watertight. Cells don't age, he insisted. What ages is the body, that lousy polluted environment they're forced to live in. Lay on a perfect buffet for them and they'll divide happily until the end of time. And this myth ruled over biology for a full half-century, right up until a young man named Leonard Hayflick punched a hole clean through the beautiful soap bubble in 1961. Hayflick found that no matter how tenderly he cared for his human cells, after roughly 50 divisions, they would all, collectively, down tools, stall out dead on that number, and then slowly wither away. This is the famous Hayflick limit. So what about Carrel's chicken heart, the one that beat merrily for 34 years? Well, it turns out it was the sort of blunder that would make any lab technician break out in a cold sweat. Carrel was so certain the chicken heart needed the very finest nutrition that he ordered his assistants to feed it a special chick embryo extract, fresh every day. Sounds wonderfully high-tech, that phrase, chick embryo extract. What it actually was, in plain terms, was the meat juice squeezed out of fresh chick embryos that had been ground up. And swimming in that cloudy juice, inevitably, were fresh, lively, brand new young chicken cells. In other words, the reason the immortal chicken heart was immortal is that the assistants, without ever realizing it, were dropping fresh recruits into the dish every single day. It's a bit like boasting that your axe has gone 100 years without breaking, when, somewhere along the line, you've quietly replaced the handle 5 times and the head 3 times. Hayflick's discovery laid bare a genuinely hair-raising truth. Death is not an accident. It's a program, set in advance. Every cell, the moment it's born, carries a little punch card in its pocket. Each time it divides, one hole gets punched through that card. And when the last hole is punched, game over. It took scientists decades more to track down the physical object doing the counting. It sits right at the very ends of your chromosomes, and it has a name. It's called the telomere. Honestly, if I wanted to explain telomeres to you in one move, all I'd need is for you to glance down at your shoes. You know that little hard plastic wrapped tube on each end of a shoelace? The bit that lets you thread the lace through the eyelet? It has a real name. It's called an aglet. And its entire job is to stop the shoelace from fraying apart. Well, the telomere is the aglet on the end of the long shoelace we call a chromosome. It's an exquisitely clever design, and also a deeply helpless one, because the machinery that copies DNA has a built-in flaw baked right into it. The principle is a little like a man painting a floor. There's always one small patch he can't reach, the patch directly under his own 2 feet. In the same way, every time a cell divides, the very tip of the DNA loses a tiny segment that just can't get copied. And if you'd written important genes out there at the tip, then after just a handful of these clippings, the whole system would come crashing down. So nature, rather cleverly, tacked a long stretch of meaningless repeating gibberish onto the ends of the DNA. The sequence TTAGGG, over and over and over. That's the telomere. A long, content-free strip of redundant code, sitting there for one purpose only, to soak up the damage from all that clipping. Every time the cell divides, the telomere wears down a notch, exactly like the little plastic cap on your shoelace getting shaved a bit shorter each year. When you're young, your telomeres are long. Long enough to take dozens of these clippings without flinching. But as the years stack up, that cap wears away notch by notch, down toward nothing. And what happens then is a catastrophe. When the telomere finally vanishes, the exposed end of the DNA looks, to the naked eye, like a frayed shoelace. But from the cell's frantic point of view, this isn't fraying at all. It reads as a break, a snapped strand, an emergency. So the DNA repair crew comes charging in to fix the break, and in their panic they do something monumentally stupid. They grab 2 completely different chromosomes and weld their ends together. It's like tying the laces of your 2 separate shoes into one big dead knot. And the next time the cell tries to divide and pull itself in 2, these fused together chromosomes get violently ripped apart, shattering into useless fragments, a full genetic massacre. So, to head off that massacre before it starts, the moment a cell senses its telomeres are nearly spent, it sounds the highest possible alarm and drops into a state called cellular senescence. From then on, it refuses to divide at all. It's become, in effect, a zombie. Or, alternatively, it triggers a self-destruct routine with the lovely name apoptosis. At first glance, this looks like a perfect dead end, doesn't it? Divide and cause a massacre, or stop and rot. But nature does love to leave one ironic little back door cracked open inside the despair. Is there any cell out there that can smash straight through the Hayflick limit? Any cell with the magic to repair its own telomeres on and on forever and so finally achieve immortality? There is. We have a name for that kind of cell. We call it a cancer cell. The cancer cell has learned the trick of manufacturing an enzyme called telomeres, which keeps rewrapping the shoelace with fresh new plastic caps as fast as they wear away. And so the cancer cell wins the very immortality the rest of us dream about, at the modest price of killing the entire host it lives in. This really is the blackest joke in all of biology. Inside the human body, the only thing that ever truly achieves immortality turns out to be a synonym for death. So that's the modus operandi of the first gang of robbers. Your DNA doesn't just get blasted full of holes by the environment. On top of that, every single time it gets photocopied, the corner of a page gets snipped away, until eventually the whole book falls to pieces. But that's only half the story. Now imagine the opposite kind of disaster. Imagine that one day every page number is intact, not a single word is misspelled, and yet when you open the book, you find someone has poured industrial-strength glue between all the pages. You're holding a perfect, flawless book, and you still can't read one word inside it. That, right there, is the handiwork of the second gang. They don't tear the book apart. They simply make it impossible to open. If a DNA mutation is like a drunk typist who, somewhere in your encyclopedia of life, changes ate it to was eaten by it, then what we're about to deal with is stranger still, and somehow more unsettling. Picture the typist suddenly swearing off the bottle. He becomes a model of discipline. Every letter struck flawlessly, every comma in its rightful place. The book is, by any standard, perfect. But when you try to read it, you discover the pages have been firmly glued shut. You know full well the words are right there, perfect, intact, printed on the paper, an inch from your eyes, and you simply cannot get to them. That sounds, on the face of it, gentler than a mutation. At least the words are all still there. But in a laboratory at Harvard, a geneticist named David Sinclair would lean over and tell you that this reading disorder is, in fact, the true culprit behind aging. And to picture it clearly, let's borrow Professor Sinclair's favorite metaphor, the compact disc. The digital data on a CD, all those ones and zeros, is astonishingly tough. It's a lot like your DNA in that way. Unless the thing suffers real physical violence, the grooves on the disc that encode the music can survive almost indefinitely. But a CD has one fatal weakness. Its surface is a thin layer of clear protective plastic. And I think we've all lived this particular small tragedy. Your favorite disc rides around loose in the car for months, rubbing against the dashboard, gets used once or twice as a coaster for a cold drink, and before long its surface is a web of fine scratches. Slotted into the player and the laser is still down there working its heart out, but it can no longer read the data underneath. The music starts to stutter and skip, or it just drops out entirely into a maddening abrupt silence. This is David Sinclair's famous information theory of aging. In your cells, the DNA is the raw data etched into the disk. And the whole system that decides whether that data can actually be read is something called epigenetics. Epigenetics is a wildly complicated control system. Think of it as a layer of sticky notes, highlighter marks, and paper clips fastened all over the DNA. It tells each cell, this stretch of genes, read it out loud, that stretch over there, tape it shut, never open it. And this is absolutely fundamental to how life works. 'Cause here's the thing you have to hold on to. Every single cell in your body, whether it's a light-sensing cell on your retina or a flake of dead skin on your heel, carries exactly the same DNA. Every one of them is holding an identical copy of the script of life. So why does one cell grow up to play Hamlet, while another becomes a spear carrier, standing silently at the back of the stage? Epigenetics. It's epigenetics that glued shut all the pages in the liver cell about how to build a neuron, leaving only the chapters on how to be a liver. It's epigenetics that hands each cell its identity. It's what makes the liver remember it's a liver, and the skin remember its skin. But, and here's the question that matters, why does this beautifully precise marking system slowly collapse into chaos over time? Why does the disc get scratched in the first place? This is not simple wear and tear. This is a story about a butler who walked off the job. Inside your cells lives a group of proteins, sometimes called longevity proteins. Under normal circumstances, they perch on the DNA like a team of meticulous butlers, making absolutely sure that the genes which shouldn't be opened stay firmly locked away. They keep the whole epigenome in good order. But unfortunately, these butlers moonlight. They've got a second job. They're also members of the DNA Repair Commando Squad. Remember that DNA, constantly snapping under the strain of its brutal environment. Every time a strand breaks, an alarm goes off. And the moment it does, these butlers have to drop the keys and the seals they were holding and sprint off to the break site to perform emergency surgery. Once the crisis is handled, they're supposed to trot back to their original posts and lock all those genes up again. When you're young, this whole dance runs like clockwork. But in old age, as the breaks come faster and faster and more often, the butlers get run absolutely ragged. And sometimes, after they've finished patching up the DNA, they get lost on the way home, or they're simply too exhausted to make it back at all. And so the genes that were supposed to stay sealed are left wide open, unattended. The little muting switches drift loose. And this triggers an identity crisis at the microscopic level. Let's zoom in on a single aging liver cell living through this crisis, because it's a genuine little tragedy. In its youth, this cell was a workaholic, single-mindedly scrubbing toxins out of your blood, day and night, never complaining. But now, with the butlers gone from their posts, it starts to get confused. The skin genes that were locked away suddenly come loose, kidney genes flicker unexpectedly on. And the poor thing slowly slides into a kind of cellular dementia. It dimly remembers that it's supposed to be a liver, but it also has the nagging feeling that it might be a patch of skin, or possibly half a kidney. So it starts doing genuinely baffling things. It'll synthesize a little skin protein here, or try to fire off electrical signals like a neuron there. At this point, it's not a professional liver cell at all anymore. It's a confused, jumbled up hybrid. And you could fairly say this is the very essence of aging. What's broken isn't the hardware. The genes themselves are fine. What's crashed is the software, the epigenetics. Your cells haven't died. They've simply forgotten who they are. Which sounds about as hopeless as it gets. A scratch is physical damage. Usually it means the disc is ruined for good. And for a long stretch of time, biologists believed this epigenetic chaos was a one-way street with no exit. Once you slid down it, there was no coming back. Until a Japanese doctor named Shinya Yamanaka walked in and dropped a nuclear bomb on the whole field. In 2006, at Kyoto University, Yamanaka did something that, at the time, looked very nearly like witchcraft. He identified 4 special genes, the ones now famous as the Yamanaka factors. And if you force a mature cell to switch those 4 genes on, a miracle unfolds. That already grown, wrinkled, fully committed old skin cell turns out to possess the power to wind time backward. Its epigenetic marks are all wiped clean, reset to the original factory state. It reverts into a stem cell, a cell as fresh and pristine as a newly fertilized egg, an infant cell brimming with infinite possibility. This isn't patching a scratch. This is a full factory reset. The discovery stunned the world, and it won Yamanaka the Nobel Prize. And if all that sounds a little too good to be true, well, you're right to be suspicious. Because when we try to apply this miracle to a whole living animal, it tips straight into a horror film. If you force all 4 factors on in every cell of a mouse's body at once, the mouse does not turn into a sprightly young mouse. Quite the opposite. Its cells completely lose track of who they are and start growing wildly, with no off switch. The result is a thing called a teratoma. And a teratoma isn't a normal tumor. It's a monstrous ball of flesh assembled out of chaotic, randomly chosen tissue. Cut one open, and you might find a clump of hair sprouting out of nowhere, a few half-formed teeth even, and I'm sorry about this image, a single eye, staring blankly off into the void. The cells, having utterly lost their identities, just start bolting random body parts together at random. That's the price of a total reformat. You wiped the hard drive clean, and in the process you deleted not just the virus but the entire operating system along with it. What you're left with is a heap of useless biological garbage. What we actually need is a system restore, not a full reformat. So back at David Sinclair's team at Harvard, they started attempting something far more delicate. What if you took out the one factor that drives the wild growth and used only the remaining 3? What if you rolled the system back just far enough to the smooth-running classic version, instead of all the way down to that primitive state that hasn't even got the basic drivers installed yet? They ran the experiment on a few old blind mice with damaged optic nerves. Now normally, once the central nervous system of an adult mammal is severed, it never grows back. Ever. This is precisely why glaucoma in human beings is an incurable disease. But when they injected those mice with this gentler version of the youth elixir, an astonishing thing happened. The mice's optic nerves actually grew back. Those old nerve cells, withered and gray like dead wood, suddenly recovered the memories of their own youth and began to surge forward and grow. The blind mice could see again. This is about the closest thing to outright magic that science has ever reached. There, in the laboratory, with our own eyes, we watched the arrow of time get grabbed and forced to point the wrong way. The scratches on the disc were buffed out and filled in. The music started flowing again, clear as the day it was pressed. What this discovery seems to be telling us is that aging might not be an unavoidable wearing out at all. It might be a software glitch that can simply be rebooted. If your body is a computer, then maybe it's slowing down not because the hardware is failing, but because it's got far too many background programs running and a registry clogged up with junk. And if we could just locate the right restart button, perhaps we could get the whole system humming again, smooth as new. It sounds full of hope, doesn't it? Almost dizzyingly so. If we can reinstall the operating system, then surely that means the door to immortality has just swung open. Hold off on popping the champagne, because even if we have figured out how to repair the software, that only deals with 2 of our 3 gangs of robbers. Picture it this way. You've just reinstalled the latest, fastest operating system, and the software is screaming along beautifully. But the computer case itself is packed with 10 years of dust. The cooling fan is jammed solid with the corpses of dead cockroaches. The capacitors are oozing slime from years of overheating. In that situation, it doesn't matter how flawless your software is, that CPU is still going to burn itself out. And that is precisely the next nightmare we have to face. At this very moment, deep inside your cells, a crew of janitors, whose entire job is housekeeping, has just walked off and gone on strike. The garbage is mounting up, the power plants are leaking, and the whole city is teetering on the edge of being drowned in its own waste. If the first two parts of our story were a kind of vandalism in the library, either tearing the page numbers out or gluing the pages into a useless block, then the trouble coming next has nothing to do with information at all. It's about the environment. It's more like a crew of lazy city sanitation workers deciding to call an open-ended strike in the dead of summer, letting the trash pile up into reeking mountains until the streets themselves are drowning in the stink of rot. This gang of robbers goes by a name that sounds extremely academic: loss of proteostasis and mitochondrial dysfunction. But we can describe the whole state of affairs with one far blunter word: filthy. If you could shrink yourself down to the nanoscale and crawl into a cell inside an 80-year-old to have a look around, you'd find the place is, frankly, a sanitation disaster. But to really feel the scale of that disaster, we first have to see just how spotless you were back in your youth. A young, healthy cell is run like a tightly managed luxury hotel. The lobby gleams. Everything moves with order and purpose. And that's mostly thanks to an extraordinarily efficient, completely invisible cleaning crew, what biologists call autophagy. Translated literally, the word means self-eating, which sounds a little alarming, I'll grant you, but it's an absolutely essential part of keeping life in order. Whenever a protein in the cell gets misfolded, imagine a bedsheet wadded up into a hopeless tangle instead of folded neatly. Or whenever an organelle wears out, like a desk lamp that's finally given up the ghost, a patrolling janitor immediately slaps a little garbage label onto it. These tagged pieces of garbage then get hauled off to a set of incinerators called lysosomes, where they're broken back down into their basic raw materials and reassembled into brand new parts. The system is flawless. Your body performs billions of these teardowns and rebuilds every single day. You are, quite literally, a ship of Theseus, that old puzzle about the ship that has every plank replaced, one by one, until you have to ask whether it's even the same ship, except your version is being rebuilt constantly while you walk around inside it. But as the years climb, this cleaning crew starts to slack off, and so the garbage begins to pile up. Which brings us to the nightmare scene of the hoarder. The aging cell is no longer a 5-star hotel. It's become the home of a frantic hoarder. The hallways are crammed wall to wall with old newspapers, half-eaten takeaway boxes, and bags of moldering clothes. And in the microscopic world, this garbage is mostly something called misfolded protein. Now, proteins are the building blocks of life. The Lego bricks, if you like. Except they're far more delicate than Lego. They have to fold themselves up into exquisitely precise 3-dimensional shapes in order to work at all. And if that folding goes even slightly wrong, the protein turns into a useless, sticky clump. The cleanest way to picture it is an egg. A young, healthy protein is like the white of a raw egg, clear, flowing, full of life and motion. A misfolded protein is like a hard-boiled egg. It's gone hard, gone opaque, congealed into a stiff, dead little solid. And the worst part, the genuinely unfair part, is that you cannot turn a boiled egg back into a raw one. It's a one-way trip. So when the cleaners go on strike, these boiled eggs end up scattered all over the floor of the cell, and nobody is coming to sweep them up. Up in your brain, this particular flavor of garbage buildup goes by a much more frightening name: Alzheimer's disease. When we dissect the brain of someone who died with Alzheimer's, those famous amyloid plaques we find scattered through it are, in essence, exactly this: heaps of protein garbage that nobody ever cleaned up. They clog the communication lines running between neurons, and eventually they suffocate the neurons to death. So in a real sense, dementia isn't some impossibly complex disease. At its root, it's a sanitation problem. The brain is stuffed full of trash that never once got taken out to the curb. But even that isn't the worst of it. Right at the far end of that garbage-choked hallway sits the cell's basement, and down there, a crucial piece of machinery is belching black smoke and giving off a low, unsettling roar. That's the mitochondrion, your power plant. And the mitochondrion is the subject of one of the most incredible stories in the whole history of evolution. The story that is also, in effect, an alien invasion that's been going on for 1.5 billion years. because mitochondria are not native to our bodies at all. An immensely long time ago, an ancient bacterium swallowed another smaller bacterium whole. But the smaller one didn't get digested. Instead, it stayed on as a kind of tenant, moving in for good, taking sole responsibility for manufacturing energy. And to this very day, the mitochondria still keep their own separate set of DNA, and it's passed down only through the mother's line. Which means that every power plant inside you is a direct descendant of that one maternal bacterium from hundreds of millions of years ago. They are, in the most real sense, outsiders living within you. Every move you make, every beat of your heart, every passing thought in your head depends entirely on these alien tenants burning glucose and oxygen to keep the lights on. And here a curious biological paradox raises its hand. If we didn't breathe at all, would we live longer? The answer, in theory at least, though it's also, in practice, 0% achievable, because oxygen is an extraordinarily dangerous dance partner. The process by which mitochondria burn oxygen to make energy is a bit like lighting a bonfire inside each of your cells. A bonfire keeps you warm, certainly, but a bonfire also throws off sparks. And in biology, those sparks have a name. We call them free radicals. For a long time, scientists, along with a great many vitamin salesmen, it has to be said, told you that free radicals were nothing but pure villains. They oxidize your cells, the story went, making you rust away like the cut face of an apple left out on the counter. So you better desperately eat antioxidants, eat blueberries, eat vitamin E by the handful to stamp them out. But this turns out to be a real misunderstanding. The latest research shows that a small number of those sparks are actually a necessary warning signal. When the mitochondria spit out a few free radicals, what they're really shouting is, "Things are getting a bit hot down here, somebody come and fix the boiler." The cell picks up that signal, fires up its repair machinery, and upgrades its defenses. And this, by the way, is exactly why moderate exercise makes you healthier. Even though exercise produces a great surge of free radicals, that surge forces the body to turn around and repair itself. Scientists call this phenomenon hormesis, the idea that a small dose of a stressor makes you stronger. But if you go the other way and frantically gulp down antioxidants to snuff out every last spark, the body simply assumes that all is well and quietly stops doing its repairs. The result is that the boiler rots through with nobody minding it. So the real problem with aging isn't that there are sparks at all. It's that, in the end, there are far too many sparks, and the whole multi-stage warning system breaks down completely. As the years wear them down, the mitochondria, those alien tenants, start to age and leak oil, turning into inefficient, dangerous old boilers. The same glucose goes in, but less and less energy comes out. And this is exactly why old people always seem to feel so tired. At the same time, the free radicals these worn-out boilers throw off come pouring out in numbers like a volcanic eruption. And when those leaked free radicals, along with stray bits of mitochondrial DNA, spill out into the body of the cell, the body panics. It assumes it's been invaded by bacteria. And don't forget, the mitochondria essentially are bacteria. That tragic case of mistaken identity touches off body-wide inflammation, and we end up being slowly burned up from the inside by our own generators. Faced with this bleak picture of garbage and black smoke, you might reasonably ask, is there really no creature on Earth that solved this problem? And nature turns around and shows us what may be the single ugliest and yet most miraculous animal alive, the naked mole rat. If you've never had the pleasure, picture a pink cocktail sausage that's wrinkled all over, completely hairless, and has somehow sprouted a pair of enormous buck teeth. They live in burrows under the ground in East Africa. And by any standard of beauty you'd care to name, they are spectacularly breathtakingly ugly. But that ugliness seems to be the very price of their longevity. An ordinary house mouse lives just 2 or 3 years. A naked mole rat can keep going for over 30. Scaled up to human terms, that's the rough equivalent of a person living 800 years. And they almost never get cancer. What's their secret? Their cleaners never go on strike, that's what. The protein quality control system inside a naked mole rat is fanatically strict. Their cells are packed with an unusually high level of chaperone proteins. You can think of these as authoritarian tutors of protein folding. The instant any protein dares to fold itself incorrectly, the tutor either corrects it on the spot or hurls it straight into the incinerator. Even at the grand old age of 30, the proteins inside a naked mole rat cells are still as spotless as a newborn south. It's almost as if nature is using this creature to mock us. You want to live as long as a god? Fine, but you'll have to look like a moldy sausage to do it. You'd rather be as gorgeous as a peacock. Then you'll have to accept dying young. Beauty, it seems, is a kind of firework of the lifespan, set alight and burned through fast by your own genes. So, given that almost none of us can aesthetically stomach the idea of turning into a naked mole rat, is there any hope left at all for us humans? As it happens, our bodies do come fitted with a similar set of efficient cleaning mechanisms. It's just that ours have been switched off by a greedy foreman. This foreman's name is mTOR, which stands, if you must know, for the mechanistic target of rapamycin. You can think of him as the cell's commander-in-chief, the one in charge of the great switch between growth and repair. But this foreman has a serious flaw. He is an incurably short-sighted maniac. The moment he catches so much as a whiff of nutrients in the blood, a few amino acids, a little sugar, he leaps up and bellows, "We've got bricks, lads. Quick, put up a new building. Divide. Grow." And while this foreman is locked in his manic building frenzy, every bit of the cleaning work gets called off. Nobody takes out the garbage. Nobody fixes the boilers. Everyone's too busy throwing up new construction. It's only when nutrients run scarce, that is, only when you're genuinely hungry, that the foreman finally shuts his mouth. And only then is the cell grasp that there's a crisis on, and flip over into the repair mode called autophagy, and finally start gathering up all that accumulated garbage and recycling it. Here's the tragedy though. The greatest curse of modern civilization isn't famine, it's that we can no longer feel hungry. From the moment we wake up, we are eating. Breakfast, then a latte, then lunch, then a little afternoon snack, then dinner, then something at midnight. Our blood is perpetually awash in high concentrations of sugar and amino acids, which means the foreman is screaming grow, grow, grow 24 hours a day, while the cleaners are off on permanent indefinite holiday. We have, quite simply, eaten our way into a rusted-out machine stuffed to the rafters with garbage. So this second gang of robbers is, in a real sense, our own accomplice. It's our endless eating that keeps blocking the cleaner's route to work. By now the picture is coming into focus. The first gang of robbers, that typist, scrambled the blueprint. And the second gang? The foreman and his striking cleaners, who fouled the whole environment and sprang a leak in the generators. And when the garbage is piled up higher than the ceiling, when the leaking toxins have made the place utterly unlivable, that poor cell finally breaks down completely, and it faces one last ultimate choice. It can choose a dignified suicide, triggering its apoptosis program for the good of the collective, or it can go completely, stark raving mad. And the cell that goes mad neither works nor dies. It becomes an undying monster, holed up deep in your tissues, screaming endlessly, spitting venom at everything within reach, and even dragging its healthy neighbors over to its side. Down in the shadowy corners, this third gang of robbers is quietly assembled. And they are not foreign invaders. They are traitors. So now, at last, we're going to go and hunt these zombies down. In biology's thick dictionary, there's one word that's been granted a strange and mournful kind of poetry: apoptosis. The word comes from the Greek, and originally it described petals dropping from a flower, or autumn leaves losing their grip and drifting quietly down from the branch. In the world of the cell, it stands for an extraordinarily noble spirit of self-sacrifice. When a cell discovers that its own DNA is damaged beyond any hope of repair, or realizes it's been infected by a virus, it makes a clear-eyed, resolute decision to take its own life. To avoid dragging down all the brothers and sisters around it, it sets off its internal self-destruct routine, neatly chopping its own nucleus to pieces, carefully packaging up its own membrane, and then it's quietly eaten by a passing immune cell and leaves not a single trace behind. It's a perfect farewell. Every single day, billions of cells inside you silently perform this tragic little solo. And it's precisely this endless microscopic suicide that keeps you as healthy as you are right now. But not every cell turns out to possess that noble virtue. As the years pass, some cells, after receiving the notice that reads "Please go and die now," simply refuse to comply. They crumple the notice into a ball, toss it in the bin, and then bolt the door from the inside. They won't die, but they also can't divide and work like a normal cell. So they linger in a strange in-between state, neither properly dead nor properly alive. Biologists gave this phenomenon a refined and elegant name, cellular senescence. But privately, we much prefer the term lifted straight out of a B-grade horror movie, zombie cells. And these bring us at last to the final gang we have to deal with, and also the most insidious of the three, the third gang of robbers. They're no longer the outside vandals, nor the cleaners doing a slack, half-hearted job. They are the traitors within. But before we drag them in front of the court, we really do owe them a word in their defense. Because these zombie cells were not born villains. In fact, they were once heroes who protected you. Remember the Hayflick limit? When a cell has divided too many times and worn its telomeres down to nothing, or when its DNA has taken severe damage, it faces a stark fork in the road: either become a cancer cell and divide out of control, or stop dividing altogether. And to avoid becoming the very tumor that kills you, these cells made a noble choice. They crippled their own powers. They hit the pause button and entered the senescent state. It was a heavy personal sacrifice, made for the safety of the whole. They were supposed to be quietly cleared away by the immune system once they'd stopped dividing, exiting the stage gracefully, like old soldiers retiring with honor. But here's the tragedy. As you age, your immune system, the police force inside your body, also gradually goes dim-sighted and slow. And so these cells, which originally stood as the breakwater holding back the flood of cancer, didn't pull back once the danger had passed. They just stayed put and rotted on the beach. The hero lived too long, and finally turned into the dragon. These clinging zombie cells, the ones that flatly refuse to die, no longer divide, but their metabolism runs strangely, feverishly active. And that brings us to their most terrifying weapon, SASP, the Senescence Associated Secretory Phenotype. It sounds like the acronym of some elite special forces unit, but in truth it's a lot more like a broken car alarm. SASP has a whole stream of chemical signals that the zombie cell sprays out into its surroundings. In the beginning, it was a genuine distress call. The zombie cell is screaming, "I can't take it anymore. Somebody send a policeman over to eat me, please." And when you're young, the immune police arrive fast. The zombie cell gets swiftly cleaned up, and the tissue recovers its health. But in old age, the police can't hear the call, or they simply can't run anymore. And so this alarm just keeps blaring and blaring on for a full 30 years. It keeps spraying inflammatory chemicals over everything around it, desperate to attract some attention. But it's no longer a cry for help. It's become a serious public nuisance. And this chemical scream is astonishingly contagious. It's like living on a quiet street, and one day a parked car's alarm breaks and just keeps shrieking there, day and night, with nobody to shut it off. Pretty soon every neighbor up and down the block is losing their mind too. Blood pressure climbs, tempers fray, and before long they're all screaming right along with it. When a healthy young cell gets exposed for long enough to the toxins streaming off a zombie cell, it too takes damage, and then it converts into a brand new zombie cell of its own. The mechanism of the contagion really is that simple. A zombie bites a healthy person, and the healthy person turns into a zombie too. Scientists coined a very fashionable term for this state, secondary senescence. But don't be taken in by the slick marketing of the phrase. What it's actually describing is a brutal civil war. Your body is no longer a peaceful paradise. It's a war zone, locked in a state of constant low-intensity firefighting. Your joints flare up red and swollen, that's arthritis. The walls of your blood vessels stiffen and harden, that's atherosclerosis. Your brain grows sluggish and slow. And the essence of every one of these conditions is the same. The zombie army inside you, locked in an endless trench war against your own immune forces. And in that war, the most innocent victims of all are your last line of reserves, the stem cells. Stem cells are your all-purpose repairmen, the ones responsible for differentiating into fresh new cells to patch up damaged tissue. But on a battlefield this thick with toxins and inflammation, the stem cells are caught between threats from within and without. On the one hand, they're choked by the poison gas the surrounding zombies keep belching out, and they don't dare leave the house, which is to say, their ability to differentiate gets suppressed. And on the other hand, the stem cells themselves have grown old too. Their own telomeres are already worn down, their own epigenetics is in disarray. So the repair foreman pokes his head out to go mend a wound, and promptly gets beaten up by his zombie neighbors, or simply throws in his lot and joins the zombie ranks himself. And this is exactly why an old person's wound heals so much more slowly than a young person's. South. It isn't that the body doesn't want to fix it. It's that the repairman has defected too. Facing the combined chokehold of all three gangs of robbers, DNA blasted into fragments, Garbage heaped into mountains, zombies setting fires in every direction. It really looks as if humanity is destined to lose this war. But hold on a second. Because just a few years ago, scientists at the Mayo Clinic went and found a shotgun lying in the laboratory. Feed mice a particular combination of drugs, dasatinib and quercetin for instance, and a small miracle occurs. These drugs are called senolytics. And their mechanism is wonderfully cold-blooded and precise. They can pick out exactly those zombie cells that are clinging on and refusing to die, and then forcibly trigger their suicide program. To put it plainly, it's a special forces unit built for the sole purpose of hunting zombies. The results of the experiment were jaw-dropping. Those old mice, the ones that had started out with thinning, patchy fur, hunched backs and clouded over eyes, went through an astonishing reversal once the zombie cells inside them were cleared away. Their fur grew back thick and glossy. Their kidney function came back. And they ran on the exercise wheel as fast as young lads. They didn't turn into undying monsters. They simply became young again. This was the very first time in human history that we weren't merely repairing the damage that aging causes. We were directly, physically, deleting the source that causes the aging in the first place. It's like finally having had enough of the neighbor with the broken car alarm and simply deporting them out of the country altogether, and the whole community instantly getting its peace and quiet back. Now, much as I'd love to go sprinting down to the pharmacy this very minute and buy a sack full of quercetin to sprinkle on my breakfast, these are, for the moment, only results in mice. And biology is never black and white. As maddening as zombie cells are, in certain very specific moments, right when a wound is in the middle of healing, for example, the growth factors they secrete actually help the tissues gab over. So, if we went and slaughtered every zombie indiscriminately, we might well find that, sure, we don't age, but the next time we cut a gash in a finger, it simply never heals. Still, this has, without a doubt, kicked open a door into a whole new world. Perhaps in the not-too-distant future, what we'll go to the hospital for won't be a checkup at all. It'll just be a routine zombie clean-out. So by now we've taken aging completely apart, mechanism by mechanism. We know the cold calculus behind it springs from evolution. And if you line all the culprits up against the wall now, the way you'd line up a row of suspects behind the one-way glass, you can put a face to every one of them. There's the drunk typist who scrambled the blueprint, and beside him the vandal who scratched the disk until the cell forgot its own name. And next to those two, the cleaners who downed tools and let the garbage swallow the room. And right at the end, half in shadow, the zombies who wouldn't die and talked the neighbors into burning the place down with them. Science has handed down, at the molecular level, about as clear and final a death sentence as you could ask for. And by rights, you'd think that a rational species having grasped all these mechanisms would learn to accept its fate with a little grace, or at the very least go looking for sensible scientific countermeasures. But the truth is exactly the opposite, because when we come face to face with the fear of death, reason is almost always the very first thing to walk out the door. Both before real science arrived and frankly well after it did, humanity, in its desperation to cheat death, has done a whole parade of things so spectacularly stupid that you genuinely start to wonder whether we possess any intelligence at all. From drinking gold, to injecting the ground-up extract of dog testicles, to the modern billionaires' blood-swapping party, humanity's history of anti-aging reads like a farcical comedy, co-starring con men, lunatics, and people utterly paralyzed by fear. So let's step out of the tidy, rigorous laboratory for a while, and go and have a look at some of the near-insane things human beings have actually tried in the war against aging. If the scientific facts we covered earlier, all that DNA and mitochondria and zombie cells, were a nutritionally balanced wholemeal breakfast with roughly the flavor and texture of cardboard, then now we're going to shove those healthy foods aside and wheel out a platter of donuts, drenched in syrup, every color of the rainbow, and quite possibly mildly radioactive. Welcome to the anti-aging circus. In here, reason is the first member of the audience to get up and leave. When we're staring down death, that ultimate nothingness, humanity, this species that fancies itself the cleverest thing on Earth, will, without a flicker of hesitation, flush its own intelligence straight down the toilet in exchange for even the most absurd little sliver of hope. We love to laugh at the ancient emperors who swallowed mercury and cinnabar in their hunt for immortality, and to find their ignorance rather charming. China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, famously sent expeditions to the ends of the earth chasing an elixir of eternal life, and dosed himself with mercury for his trouble. But believe me, if Qin Shi Huang time traveled to the present day and got a good look at what we're up to in Silicon Valley, he would surely conclude that these modern people are even more thoroughly out of their minds than he ever was. To find the source of this particular strain of madness, we need to wind the clock back to Paris in the year 1889. The Eiffel Tower had only just been finished, and a physiologist named Charles-Édouard Brown-Séquard decided to stage a frankly scandalous demonstration on the podium of the French Academy of Sciences in front of the most eminent scientific minds in all of Europe. Brown-Séquard was 72 at the time, and originally a much respected figure, but he could feel the cold breath of aging on his neck, and he didn't like it. His physical strength was failing. His mind wasn't as sharp as it had been, and, as he delicately complained in his own diary, even the arc of the parabola when he urinated wasn't quite what it once was. For most Victorian gentlemen, this would have been the cue to buy a comfortable rocking chair and see out one's twilight years by the fire. But Brown-Séquard was an experimentalist to the bone, and working from a piece of naive and completely wrong logic, he reasoned that since young animals are so brimming with vitality, that vitality must surely be hidden away in their gonads. So he did something that turns the stomach of just about everyone, then and now. He rounded up a few unlucky guinea pigs and dogs, cut off their testicles and ground them up, stirred in a little semen and blood, strained the result into a cloudy cocktail, and then injected this liquid straight into his own thigh. Up on the podium, flushed and positively glowing, he announced to his assembled colleagues that a miracle had taken place. He declared, regained his youth. He could sprint up a flight of stairs without stopping for breath. And he proudly noted, in his official report, that the distance of his urination was now a full 25% farther than before. So, did it work? Of course it didn't. Modern medicine tells us that what Brown-Séquard actually experienced was the single most powerful placebo effect in human history. He had, in essence, given himself a rousing pep talk in an exceptionally disgusting way. Brown-Séquard died 5 years later. Now, you might be tempted to write all this off as a quaint 19th century joke. After all, we've got MRI scanners now, and gene editing. Surely it's impossible that anyone still believes in this kind of witchcraft. And yet, that simply isn't the case. The witchcraft of those days has, in our time, evolved into something far more frightening, because this time, it actually works. The only real difference is that the alchemists of the old days wore long robes, whereas today's alchemists wear linen shirts and sip iced Americanos in the office towers of Manhattan and San Francisco. Let's talk about the modern version of the Brown-Séquard cocktail, Young Blood. The plot of this one seems lifted straight out of a vampire film, but it actually grows out of an extremely serious and genuinely spine-chilling scientific experiment called parabiosis. As far back as the 1950s, Clive McKay at Cornell University was already doing it. He sewed an old mouse and a young mouse together, like conjoined twins, and connected up their blood vessels so the two of them shared a single circulation. And unlike Brown-Séquard's testicle juice, this one was no joke. It actually worked. That old mouse really did grow younger. Its muscles got their elasticity back, its liver function improved, and its brain even sprouted fresh new neurons. While the unlucky young mouse, meanwhile, aged rapidly, as if its very life force were being quietly siphoned away. This experiment then sat gathering dust in the basement of the scientific world for the better part of half a century, right up until it got dug back out, recently, by Silicon Valley billionaires. For these tech titans, men long accustomed to solving every problem in life by throwing money at it, including, but not limited to, the law, traffic jams, and the small matter of relocating to Mars, this was practically the gospel. And here's the real tragedy. It isn't that young blood is fake. It's that we still don't actually understand how it works. While the scientists were still painstakingly trying to pin down exactly which factor in the blood is doing the heavy lifting, whether it's a molecule called GDF11, for instance, the tycoons had already lost patience and jammed the needle straight into young people's veins. Peter Thiel, the co-founder of PayPal, once publicly expressed keen interest in the technology. And in California, a company called Ambrosia actually opened its doors for a time, selling the blood plasma of 16 to 25-year-olds to the rich at $8,000 a liter. You heard that correctly. In 21st century America, all you had to do was swipe your black Amex card, and you could have the vitality of the young pumped directly into your own aging veins. And that brings us to the central character of our story today, and currently the single most extreme anti-aging biohacker on the planet, Brian Johnson. Brian is a software magnate who pocketed $800 million after selling his company to eBay. A few years ago, the then 45-year-old Johnson decided to launch a project he called Blueprint. And if you're picturing just another rich man who's gotten a bit into wellness, then you are badly underestimating the sheer scale of this particular madness. Because Brian doesn't merely want to be immortal, he wants to turn himself into a biochemical robot, one with no free will at all, driven entirely by algorithms. He has handed control of his own body over to the algorithms, lock, stock, and barrel. He no longer asks himself, what do I feel like eating? Or how long do I want to sleep? He asks the data. He gets up at 5 every morning and swallows dozens of supplements. He eats a vegan meal that has the appearance of pale green cement paste. Every day he shines red light on his face and stimulates his pelvic floor muscles with electromagnetic pulses. He even monitors the number of erections he has during the night and proudly announces to the internet that this particular metric has now returned to the level of an 18-year-old South. To Brian, this isn't private information at all. It's a KPI, proof that the system is running well. But the single most outrageous thing he did was the 3-generation blood swap. In his pursuit of ultimate purity, Brian wasn't content to simply buy blood from strangers. In that photograph that went viral right across the internet a few years ago, 3 generations stand together. Grandfather, father, and son. His then 17-year-old son donated an entire body's worth of blood. The plasma was separated out and transfused into the then 45-year-old Brian. And Brian, in turn, had his own blood drawn out and transfused into his 70-year-old father. It was a genuinely unsettling moment, dripping with Freudian overtones. The father, quite literally, drinking the blood of the son. Watching these billionaires and their deranged antics, your first reaction, as an ordinary person, is probably just to laugh. But once you finish laughing, a deep unease settles into your breath and refuses to leave. Because what if they succeed? If, somewhere down the line, anti-aging really does become a service that only billionaires can afford, then what kind of world are we walking into? This technology won't go the way penicillin did, starting as a miracle and ending up as a cheap drug at a few dollars a box. Because if young blood genuinely works, then youth itself turns into a resource that can be cornered and monopolized. But even that isn't the most frightening part. Because the most frightening thing isn't depression, it's stagnation. The great physicist Max Planck once said a piercing thing: science advances one funeral at a time. Death is, at present, the only fair mechanism of redistribution we have. And it's also the ultimate engine of all human innovation. It's only when the old generation finally departs, taking with them their stale ideas, their fossilized prejudices, and the power they cling so tightly to, that the younger generation gets the room to make mistakes, to create, and to change the world. But in that Silicon Valley vampire future, the CEO who runs the company might never retire. He'll just sit there, maintaining the physiology of a 30-year-old on a steady diet of his own great-grandchildren's blood, clutching the levers of power right into the 25th century. Imagine if Newton had never died. He might well have used his enormous authority to crush Einstein's theory of relativity before it ever got off the ground. If certain dictators had never died, the door to social change would have been bolted shut forever. Human society would sink into a kind of perfect eternal stagnation, a world ruled by centuries-old, algorithm-driven elders, where nothing new ever happens again, and history just loops, endlessly, in place. And this is no longer science fiction. This is something already underway right now, in laboratories and in California mansions. We are standing at the very edge of an enormous ethical cliff, clutching a test tube of so-called immortality elixir, and still bickering over whether its flavor is more like strawberry or more like dog food pellets. But before we let ourselves spiral into a despairing panic over the prospect of immortal tyrants, perhaps we should first take our eyes off these anxious tech maniacs entirely, and go and look at a completely different group of people on this planet. Because while the elites of Silicon Valley are pouring millions of dollars into cracking the code of aging, with the most complex algorithms, the most expensive instruments, and the most revolting liquids imaginable, in certain remote corners of the earth there's a group of people who can't even get a Wi-Fi signal. and who appear to have pulled the whole thing off without breaking a sweat. They don't track their nightly erection counts. They don't choke down green cement paste. Some of them even smoke and drink. And they live to 100. They'd laugh at all our anxiety the way you might laugh at someone trying to use calculus to work out how to walk. Doesn't that sound a little too good to be true, good to the point of smelling like a con? Exactly. Because sometimes, statistics are even better liars than vampires. But set that aside for a moment. Compared with those Silicon Valley tycoons gulping down green sludge in a bid to turn themselves into some kind of biochemical algorithm, we would all so much rather turn our gaze towards somewhere warmer, somewhere more enviable. In fact, this may well be the precise shape of your own ultimate fantasy of a perfect old age. The picture goes something like this. Sunlight pours across the rugged coastline of Sardinia or over some quiet, unnamed village in Okinawa. A 100-year-old man, his skin dark and his face creased like a dried-up riverbed, sits beneath an olive tree. There's a glass of red wine in his hand, and the table in front of him is loaded with fresh tomatoes, fish, and crusty wholemeal bread. He's never owned a gym membership. He takes no supplements. He has never in his life heard the words mTOR or mitochondria. He just chats with his neighbors every afternoon, takes his sheep up the hillside to graze, and then, somehow, inexplicably, sails right on past his 100th birthday. These places have a name, the Blue Zones. According to a stack of best-selling books in an endless run of travel magazines, these are the great longevity oases of the Earth, regions where the density of centenarians is outrageously, almost suspiciously high. The people who live there seem to have hung on to some ancient wisdom that the rest of us city dwellers have long since forgotten. A magic recipe stitched together out of beans, family closeness, and afternoon naps. And it sounds wonderful. It's practically a ringing slap in the face to modern life itself. See, it seems to say, you poor fools, sweating it out on the treadmill, going bald with anxiety in the office. The real secret was just to slow down and eat more chickpeas. Now, I truly hate to be the one to rain on your parade, or, since we're sitting in Italy, to pee in your Chianti. Forgive the crudeness, but my job here is to dig up the truth, and the truth is very often more of a headache than a hangover. If you went and booked yourself a one-way ticket to Okinawa or Sardinia right now, expecting the local air to hand you an extra 20 years, you might end up sorely disappointed. Because not only will you fail to find the fountain of youth waiting there, you may simply have walked straight into a statistical trap built out of shoddy paperwork and pension fraud. Recently, a data analyst named Saul Justin Newman did something deeply unromantic. Instead of traveling to the Blue Zones to interview all those lovely old people, he went and pried open the government's dusty old birth and death records. And he turned up a deeply embarrassing correlation. A region with the highest density of centenarians in the world also tends to have, it turns out, the lowest literacy rate, the worst system for keeping birth records, and, most damning of all, the highest crime rate. Which sounds completely illogical, doesn't it? Why on earth would places with high crime and low education make people live longer? The answer is simple, simple enough to make you laugh out loud. It's because the people there forgot to die. Now, that's not to say the sweet potatoes and the olive oil are doing nothing. A healthy diet and tight community bonds genuinely can lower cardiovascular disease and carry you in good health to 80, even to 85. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. But to make the leap from 85 all the way up to 110, what you need in that final stretch is no longer sweet potatoes. What you need is for the town hall to have misplaced your birth certificate about a century ago, or for your grandson to have misplaced his moral compass. Because in a lot of these so-called longevity villages, when an elderly person dies, the family is faced with a very real economic decision. Do you go down to the town hall to cancel the household registration and switch off that small but reliable pension? Or do you bury Grandpa quietly out in the back garden and just keep right on collecting his money for him? Take Japan, that world-famous land of the long-lived. In 2010, the government there ran a large-scale census of its centenarians, and they decided to go and visit the man officially billed as the oldest resident of Tokyo, Sogen Kato, aged 111. When the officials finally forced their way into his apartment, they found that Mr. Sundok Kato was indeed at home. It was just that he'd been a mummified corpse lying in his bed for the past 30 years. His family had been calmly living right alongside the mummy for 3 decades, purely to keep collecting the monthly welfare payments. This is the ghost hiding inside the statistics. So the brutal truth about the blue zones turns out to be this. Eating sweet potatoes can get you to 85, but only pension fraud can get you to 115. Alright, so if we throw out the idea of geographic magic, are there any methods of extending life that have actually, genuinely been verified by science? And as it happens, there is one, and currently only this one, that has reliably stretched the lifespan of nearly every species we've tried it on, from yeast to roundworms to fruit flies to mice. This method doesn't cost you a single cent and doesn't require you to go hunting for the Holy Grail somewhere up in the Alps. It comes down to two words: caloric restriction. The technical term is dietary restriction, and what it boils down to simply is cutting the calories you take in each day by 30 to 40%, while still making sure your nutrition stays balanced. But what's the evolutionary logic underneath it? Why would nature ever reward an animal for not getting enough to eat? It isn't because nature has a soft spot for skinny creatures. It's because, out in the wild, famine means that right now is absolutely not a good time to be having children. When food runs short, your body immediately receives the alarm. There's a war on out there. If we have a baby now, that baby almost certainly won't survive. So the body shuts down that greedy foreman mTOR and stops pouring energy into the reproductive system. The whole organism drops into a kind of bomb shelter mode. It turns to the cells inside the body and says, "Stop renovating that wretched nursery. Pile all the sandbags up against the door. We are going to put every last scrap of energy into repairing DNA, clearing out the garbage, and reinforcing the defensive line, and we're going to hold out until this war is over. That is, until the next big meal finally arrives." And it's precisely this powerful repair machinery, switched on to survive a famine, that ends up almost by accident, extending the lifespan. In the laboratory, mice put on caloric restriction have glossy coats, are bright and full of energy, and live, on average, 30% longer, or even more. Scaled up to human terms, that's roughly the equivalent of letting you live to 120. Which sounds like fabulous news, doesn't it? If we've all got a longevity drug just sitting there, why on earth don't doctors recommend that everyone do it? Because there's an enormous side effect. Some of the more zealous biohackers out there, the members of the Caloric Restriction Society, for instance, have already taken this lifestyle out for a spin in person. They eat like sickly little birds every single day, meticulously counting the calories in every last grain of rice. And according to the people who've actually tried it, you really don't feel old, mostly because you spent every bit of your energy on feeling cold and hungry. With no spare fat on their bodies, their hands and feet are freezing all year round. With no spare energy, their libido has dropped to somewhere near zero, because in bomb shelter mode, the body genuinely sees no need for a sex life. Their tempers turn irritable, and their patience for other human beings drops down toward freezing. There was a famous experiment once, called Biosphere 2, in which 8 scientists were sealed inside a closed, self-contained ecosystem for 2 years. And because the harvests inside kept failing, they were forced into a regime of strict caloric restriction. So what was the result? Well, on paper, their physiological numbers did indeed turn beautifully healthy, cholesterol down, immunity up. But they also nearly murdered one another. They schemed and plotted against each other over the theft of a single banana, and split into 2 openly hostile camps over how to divide up the food. Which leads us to the single most famous joke about dieting ever told. Cruel, but devastatingly precise. Dieting won't necessarily make you live any longer, but it will absolutely, definitely make this life feel really, really long. It really is a marvelous little irony. You've got yourself a car that can run for 100 years, but the car has no radio, no air conditioning, and not so much as a cushion on the seat. And you're only allowed to crawl along at 20 kilometers an hour, down a single, dead straight highway that stretches on forever. Is it honestly worth it? So once we strip away the myth of the blue zones and turn down the slow torture of permanent hunger, we seem to be right back where we started, at square one. Is there really no method out there that lets you both enjoy your life and live extraordinarily long? Now maybe right about here you'll pipe up and say, but what about Jeanne Calment? That famous French old lady. She lived to 122. She smoked, she ate chocolate. Surely that one can't be a fake. Ah, Jen. She's the rock star of the longevity world, the patron saint, the cherished totem in the heart of everyone who refuses to diet and refuses to exercise. Her very existence seems to thumb its nose at every last piece of health advice ever given. Look, it says, as long as your genes are good, you can do absolutely whatever you please. But before we go enshrining Jean as a goddess, the Russian mathematician Nikolai Zak dropped the bombshell on the whole story back in 2018. After a detailed investigation, Zak put forward a genuinely jaw-dropping theory. The 122-year-old woman who died in 1997 may not have been Jean Calment at all. The real Jean Calment, he argued, may have actually died of pleurisy as far back as 1934 at the age of 58. And in order to dodge France's then staggering 35% inheritance tax, her daughter, Yvonne, may have quietly stepped into her mother's identity. It would have been a perfect mother-for-daughter swap. Yvonne already resembled her mother, and with the convenient cover of the passing years, she could have fooled absolutely everyone and gone on living under her mother's name all the way to the age of 99. Now, this theory caused a tremendous uproar in France, and it was met with fierce attack. But the doubts it raises really are numerous enough to be unsettling. Why did Jean later go and burn every single one of the family photographs? Why did her height shrink only a tiny amount in her old age, which doesn't fit the laws of biology at all? Unless, of course, she was in fact the daughter all along. And if even the only supercentenarian record in all of human history might turn out to be a scam, meticulously plotted out to dodge a tax bill, then what on earth can we still believe in? Perhaps we have to face an even sterner reality. Even if, like the real Jean, we'd won the genetic lottery, even if we use some future technology to repair every last bit of our DNA and sweep out every last zombie cell, would human lifespan still run up against an invisible ceiling? A ceiling not in biology, but in physics itself. Because this isn't really a question of biology anymore. It's a question of probability. Back in 1825, a British actuary named Benjamin Gompertz uncovered a thoroughly despairing law. Human mortality doubles roughly every 8 years. It's a merciless, exponential climb. When you're young, you're holding a whole fistful of dice, and it's genuinely quite hard to roll the one face that comes up death. But once you've sailed past 110, even if your body is still going strong, that invisible reaper quietly reaches in and swaps out your dice for a loaded set. What we're about to slam into is a wall. And it isn't merely a wall, it's a grease slide with a name: exponential collapse. No matter how immaculately you've maintained yourself, by that age, the number of times each year you have to flip a coin to gamble with your own life is no longer once a year. It's once every breakfast. And even if we set aside, for the moment, all those conspiracy theories about the mother-daughter swap, and just assume that Jean Calment really was the supercentenarian who lived for 122 years and 164 days under the sun in Aum, we still have to face a deeply dispiriting fact. That was 1997. In the nearly 30 years since her death, humanity has invented the smartphone, mapped the entire human genome, even flung a sports car into outer space. But on the single question of who can manage to outlive Jean, our report card reads 0. Not only has nobody broken our record, even the ones who come anywhere close to it are vanishingly few. It's like watching someone run the 100-meter dash in 9.58 seconds, and then, for the next 30 years, the very finest athletes in the world can't even break 10 seconds flat. It really does make you start to suspect that Jean Calment isn't merely a statistical outlier. She's a wall, a biological wall, with the words "road closed" painted across it in big letters. So why is this? If, somewhere down the line, we really did manage to use nanorobots to patch up every bit of DNA damage, use stem cells to swap out every aging organ, even cleared away every single zombie cell, could we then live to 1,000? I regret to inform you, no. Because once you've finally scaled that great mountain of biology, you'll look up and discover there's an even higher, even colder, and absolutely unclimbable peak still towering in the clouds above you. And that mountain's name is physics. More precisely, it's a cosmic iron law you already know, the second law of thermodynamics. If this universe has an ultimate villain, then it is entropy. This law tells us, in an extremely cold-blooded tone of voice, that the amount of chaos in any region, that is, the entropy, always increases. To put it into plain human terms, the universe hates order. The universe positively loves to come along and make a mess of the room you just finished tidying. Now, at this point, somebody in the back is going to raise a hand and object. But that's only true for closed systems. The human body is an open system. So as long as I keep eating burgers and drinking cola, I can take in low entropy energy from outside and pump high entropy waste heat back out, and thereby keep the order inside my body humming along and hold back the rising tide of entropy. And honestly, that sounds perfectly reasonable. In fact, it's exactly the view Schrödinger put forward in his little book, What is Life? Living things, he said, feed on negative entropy. In theory, as long as you keep fueling a car and replacing its worn parts, it ought to be able to run forever. But there's a logical loophole hidden in here, and it's a loophole big enough to shatter the entire dream of immortality. The problem was never the energy. The problem is the sheer complexity of repair. Because to repair one single DNA error, you need a repair enzyme. And to manufacture that repair enzyme, you need a genetic blueprint. And to protect that blueprint, you need the structure of the chromosome. And every single one of those repair steps itself burns energy, and itself produces wear. And so you tumble headlong into an infinite regress dead loop. Picture it. You hire a repairman to fix your leaking roof. Wonderful, the roof is fixed. But now the repairman's hammer is worn out. So you need a second repairman to come and fix the hammer. But that second repairman gets tired. So you need a cook to come and make him a meal. But then the cook's pot cracks. To keep a perfect eternal order running, you would need a repair system many times more complex than the body it's repairing, and that system would itself need repairing. It's like a set of Russian nesting dolls you can never ever finish unpacking. And each layer you pry open, the doll inside is just a little bit more fragile than the last. In the end, the very energy you spend fixing errors inevitably creates fresh new chaos of its own. It's like trying to clean a room with a vacuum cleaner that sucks up dust at the front end while spewing out even more dust and exhaust from its tail. So even in an open system, entropy is still the winner in the end. It just wins a little more slowly, that's all. And this is exactly what explains why, when human beings live to 110, they slam into that famous mortality plateau. Actuaries discovered that after the age of 110, your mortality rate simply levels off and holds steady at around 50%, which means that surviving each additional year becomes precisely like flipping a coin. Heads you live, tails you die. And this isn't because the Reaper has decided to play some sporting game of probability with you. It's because your body, that great tower of stacked up building blocks, has by then used up every last bit of its redundancy. When you're young, you're a sturdy fortress. Even if a few blocks get knocked out of you here and there, you catch pneumonia, say, or you break a leg, the tower still stands as steady as a mountain. But by 110, even though you might still look perfectly intact from the outside, every last one of the spare blocks down at the base has already been quietly pulled away. And at that point, the whole tower is balanced on an unbelievably fine edge. It no longer takes an earthquake to bring it down. It doesn't even take cancer. The mere vibration of being alive at all, a heartbeat that runs slightly too fast, a tiny flutter of mood, even the thermal jitter of a single molecule, is enough to send the entire structure crashing to the ground. You don't die of any specific disease. You die of fragility itself. The system simply stops turning because it can no longer withstand even the gentlest disturbance. And if we pull our field of view back even further, out to a scale vast enough to make your head swim, you'll find that this tendency toward falling apart doesn't belong to living things alone. It belongs to matter itself. It isn't only you who ages. The stars age too. The sun burns through 600 million tons of hydrogen every single second. It too is marching steadily toward its own death. Even the most solid fortresses in the entire universe, the black holes, can't escape dying. Stephen Hawking told us that black holes slowly evaporate away through what we now call Hawking radiation. Even the protons that form the very bedrock of your body, by physicists' best calculations, may ultimately be unable to outrun the fate of decay. It would take 10 to the 34th power years, yes, but it is, all the same, a destiny. Every last particle in your body, in the end, wants to return to nothingness. I'll be honest with you here, because I don't think I should pretend otherwise. When I first followed that thought all the way down, past the body, past the failing stars, down to the protons themselves quietly coming undone, something in my chest went cold and stayed cold for a while. There's no clever line I can put on it. It's just a long way down, and for a moment the bottom isn't there. So I sat with that for a while, and then, Slowly, it turned over into something else entirely. Because the very same fact that frightened me turns out to be the doorway to the strangest and most hopeful thing in this whole story. To go chasing immortality in a universe like this one is a bit like building a castle out of sand and then expecting it to stand there unmoved when the tide rolls in. You can pile the sand up very high. You can dig a very deep moat around it. You can even try to glue the individual grains together. But the tide is going to come in the end. And you might be tempted to call that a thoroughgoing nihilism. If the ending is already written, if even the black holes evaporate, then what possible meaning is there in any of our efforts? The blue zones, the telomere counts, all the hunger endured for the sake of a few more years. But this is precisely the most fascinating part of the whole story. Physics has handed us a death sentence, yes, but it has not for one moment stripped us of the sheer miracle of existing. Quite the opposite. It is precisely because the second law of thermodynamics is so utterly cold-blooded that our existence, right here, like now, comes to seem so completely unbelievable. In a universe that tilts relentlessly toward chaos, toward cold, toward disorder, over the past several billion years, countless atoms have somehow swum against that current, struggled upstream, and assembled themselves, temporarily, miraculously, into you. This is a great rebellion. This particular heap of atoms, which by every right ought to be drifting aimlessly through the empty cosmos, for one impossibly brief instant gathered itself together, came to possess a name, came to possess memory, and could even come to understand the second law of thermodynamics. And that, in itself, is the single greatest, most audacious, and most beautiful rebellion in the entire universe. So, since we already know how the story ends, then what, in the end, does this long yet fleeting journey actually mean? Let's step down now from the stern judgment seat of physics and walk out of the courtroom altogether and come out under the open night sky, because there's one last thing I want to show you. It's something borrowed. Now that we've finally put away the measuring rulers for telomeres and the waste detectors for mitochondria and the wanted posters for zombie cells, I want to ask you to do one last more thing. Lift up your hand, either one will do. Hold it up in front of your eyes and look at it, really look at it closely. What you're looking at there isn't merely skin and fine hair and a few faint lines warning you that you might want to put on a bit more hand cream. What you were looking at is the single most incredible recycling project in the entire universe, a flowing, living museum with 13.8 billion years of history behind it. Every single atom that makes up this hand of yours is already old, staggeringly old, awe-inspiringly old. Most of what's inside you, those hydrogen atoms that keep you soft and moist, were born directly in the first few minutes after the Big Bang itself, which means that the water flowing inside you right now is older than the sun, older than the entire solar system. And the calcium that makes your bones hard, and the iron that makes your blood run red, and the carbon that's letting you make sense of this very sentence. These atoms have an even more heroic life story to tell, because they aren't products of the Big Bang at all. They are the corpses of stars. They were forged billions of years ago in the unimaginable furnace of some massive star's violent dying explosion in a supernova. Which means that, in the most literal sense the words can carry, you are made of stars. Or, to put it a touch less romantically, you are the nuclear waste of stars. Across the dizzyingly long lives of these atoms, they are also enormously promiscuous. They don't care in the slightest whom they happen to belong to. That carbon atom sitting on your fingertip right now may once have been a scale on the lashing tail of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Later it might have become a slab of gray limestone. And later still, it may have been a single bead of sweat on Shakespeare's brow as he reached for a line. Atoms have no memory and no morality. They simply wander through the eternity of time, endlessly joining and parting, from rock to microbe, from tyrant to saint. And at this very moment, in this exact instant, they have miraculously gathered themselves together, obeying a mysterious set of instructions we call the genetic code, arranged in one extraordinarily precise pattern, and become you. This really is a thing to make you tremble, if you sit with it long enough. These particles, originally cold, and dead silent, and drifting through the cosmos for tens of billions of years, all at once came to possess consciousness. They gathered together into something that can think, that can love, that can taste the sweetness of ice cream on a hot day, and that can even come to understand the second law of thermodynamics. Which is to say, the very law that is destined, one day, to scatter them all apart again. We so often feel a kind of anger that we have to grow old and die. We feel that nature owes us an explanation for it, or owes us some promise of going on forever. But if we turn it around and look from another angle, that feeling is in fact a kind of towering arrogance. Because just imagine for a moment, if life really were infinite, if this train never once pulled into a final station, how unbearably, crushingly tedious that would be. It's precisely because this is a one-way ticket that the scenery sliding past outside the window seems so achingly beautiful. If this were some endlessly looping subway line, going round and round forever, you'd have buried your face in your phone ages ago and stopped caring in the slightest whether there was a sunset out the window, or whether the person sitting across from you happened to have beautiful eyes. Death is not the opposite of life. It is the only reason that life ever becomes scarce, and therefore the only reason it ever becomes precious. It's the forced exit mechanism that nature designed, precisely to keep us from sinking into an eternity of boredom. The only reason we get to stand here and breathe today's air at all is that countless atoms swam upstream against the current and temporarily and miraculously defeated entropy. It is a great loan. We borrowed these atoms out of the cosmos's vast storehouse of dust, and we assembled them into bone and muscle and brain in order to experience a few short decades of sunshine and breezes and the feeling of being held. But borrowed things must, in the end, be returned. Over the next few decades, or, if you're lucky, or if that shot of young blood somehow really does work, then perhaps over the next few centuries, you hold the exclusive right to use these atoms. So whatever you do with them, please, don't waste the chance. Because across the long, dark, cooling history of this cosmos, drifting ever closer to absolute zero, this is the one and only time these particular carbon atoms, and hydrogen atoms, and calcium atoms will ever get to feel what warmth is. In the end, exactly as physics has decreed, this whole assembly will come quietly to a close. Entropy will win. We will fall apart. We'll return the borrowed carbon to the earth, and return the borrowed water to the sea. And the atoms that were briefly us will set out once again on their long wandering journey, to become a tree perhaps, or a bird in flight, or part of some distant star. And there's really nothing in any of that to be sad about, because to wake from a slumber of billions of years for even one single brief instant, just long enough to open your eyes and take a look at this beautiful, absurd, life-filled world, that in itself is already a miracle with odds like winning the grandest lottery ever drawn. So, since we know we must, in the end, give these borrowed stars back, then before we return them, please leave them a little memory to take with them. Let those originally cold, silent atoms feel, just once, the violence of a pounding heart, the tremor that runs through you in the middle of a great helpless laugh, the warmth of being held tightly by someone you love, so that when they finally drift back out into the great void of the cosmos, they will no longer be merely dust. They will be dust that once lived.